Therapy Came Alive. I can't wait to get started with this conversation. With me today to help me sort this whole mess out is Professor of Political Science at Occidental College, Dr. Caroline Heldman. Let's welcome her to the show. Hi, Professor.
Hello, how are you, Dr. Kyla?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
Doing well after quite the ride yesterday.
Well, let's get right to it. I don't want to waste any time. Anything of a surprise last night?
Actually, no. I mean, we knew what was going to happen in terms of polling heading into Super Tuesday. Donald Trump ended up solidifying his status once again as the front runner. So he's got 334 delegates compared to Cruz's 233 and Rubio at 116. But they are all very far away from getting the 1,237 delegates that they need in order to secure the nomination. And something that the Republican Party did, which is very smart, is from all of the primaries from March 1st through March 14th are proportional, which means that even though Trump is way ahead in the delegate count, he doesn't have it cinched up. If it were a winner-take-all situation, he would have it cinched up probably in a matter of weeks. But this thing is going to drag out for a while, especially if all three Republican candidates choose to stay in the race.
Yeah, I'm sure they're wiping the sweat off their brows right now that they did do that. Would have been a different story.
Yeah,
definitely.
The Republican Party is not very happy right now. I mean, it will be very difficult for them to get Trump into the White House if he's the nominee, and they're looking at polling data just like the Democrats.
Let me ask you this. We got coming up 4 states on Saturday, if I remember correctly. I think one of them was Kentucky. For the life of me, I can't remember the other ones. How does that look right now?
Well, in terms of projecting over the weekend, it's probably going to be another Clinton and Trump sweep.
Oh, really?
And the Super Tuesday results, I mean, if you look at what was anticipated versus what actually turned out, the only, I guess, real surprise was, that Ted Cruz took 3 states, right? Alaska, Oklahoma, and Texas.
Yeah.
And also some surprise in terms of Bernie Sanders taking, there was some concern that Clinton would take Oklahoma, but Bernie Sanders ended up eking that out, right, with 52%, and taking Minnesota. But otherwise, both Trump and Clinton are sitting pretty comfortable from now really until the middle of the month in terms of amassing most of the delegates.
It's amazing. I do have a theory I want to run by you that came out this morning. But before I get to that, I know I was watching Morning Joe this morning, and they were stating that the rest of the way through the next 20 states, or I think it's 15 or 20 this month, I can't remember how many we got left this month in March, that Trump's leading almost all of them.
Yes, he is. And Clinton is leading most of them.
Most of them as well.
Yes. And
Wow.
this was somewhat anticipated on the Democratic side. Clinton has 596 pledged delegates compared to 399 for Sanders, but then she's got about 400 more super delegates. And after Iowa and New Hampshire, it was expected that she would start a rapid amassment, if you will, of pledged delegates. Any states that have a high number of people of color, especially African-American voters, are states that Clinton wins. And when you look at turnout, the real story for Super Tuesday, as well as the South Carolina primary, was that black women have become a formidable voting bloc, as we saw this, their emergence in 2008 being crucial in the election, and then an even larger gap in 2012. So black women are a crucial voting bloc for Hillary Clinton. But women in general are, the gender gap has emerged on the Democratic side for her. In fact, if you look, for example, in South Carolina, the only demographic in terms of race and gender that Bernie Sanders won were white men.
Interesting. He seems to be taking those in almost every state, isn't he? Except the ones he loses, of course.
That's correct. Yes.
Interesting. Let me throw this theory out. I just heard this morning. I didn't hear it. I was reading it. They were saying that Cruz has won all the closed caucuses and primaries, except for one. I think it was Nevada. but the open primaries and caucuses, Trump has won. Do you think that theory has any merit, that might continue on in the upcoming weeks?
So that theory is absolutely borne out in the data, meaning that the party loyalists, the kind of standard bearers who vote for the Republican Party every primary election, which is actually a somewhat unusual voter, right, in that they are dedicated enough that they turn out to vote when really only a third of Americans do in odd presidential years, and they tend to be, more hardline with the party. So you see that on both sides of the political aisle. What that means is that Trump is pulling support from people who don't typically vote in Republican primaries. So some independents, a small number of Democratic kind of blue-collar voters are jumping over there, but also people that just generally don't vote in Democratic primaries to begin with.
Do you think it'll change the race in the next upcoming weeks because of that?
I think that Trump is on track regardless.
Regardless?
I do. He looks like, he is not for sure. Trump has benefited tremendously from the fact that there are actually three strong candidates in the race, Trump being one of them. If it were a two-person race, I think he would have a difficult time getting the nomination. But unfortunately for the Republican Party, they weren't able to thin out their ranks, from 17 candidates now down to three. They just haven't been able to thin it out quickly enough to stop Trump's ascendancy. And if you look at how he's winning, he's getting he's getting around 40% of the vote. If it were a two-person race, 40% wouldn't be enough. But in the three-person race, 40% of the vote for supporting caucuses tends to be enough.
Interesting. Very fascinating stuff. So we have coming up Ohio and Florida. This could be either the beginning or the end of Kasich's and Rubio's campaigns. Can we put Dr. Heldman on the hot seat here and see what she thinks? Who's going to win those?
Well, I actually think that Kasich is going to do okay in Ohio, but Trump, if you look at the polls, Trump is still favored. I think that just looking at the polls, not making projections myself, but looking at the data, Clinton is also favored. So I have little doubt that the two of them will kind of push forward on that, if you will.
Do you actually think it'll happen? Do you actually think the Republican Party will just have to concede the fact that he's going to go ahead and win the nomination?
Well, they don't have much of an option unless something strange happens at the convention. I think there's some possibility that Donald Trump will not amass enough delegates, or whoever the leading candidate is on the Republican side will not get enough, the 1,237 needed for the nomination. And the delegate rules at the convention in late summer say that for the first vote, you have to stick with your candidate, but then on the second and beyond vote, you can switch allegiance. So there's a slim possibility that the Republicans will have a brokered convention. I know that Reince Priebus and the other Republican Party leadership, the establishment is really sweating because Donald Trump is, when you just look at him as a candidate, he is the least liked candidate in the modern media era, in presidential history, right? So he's got the highest unfavorable rating of any presidential candidate at 58%. 28% of Republicans say they will never vote for Donald Trump. I don't think that number's hard, but it's indicative of the party really not wanting him to be their standard bearer come the general election. But the big kicker is that he has a 27-point negative deficit of independents. So in simple terms, if you look at the electorate as being about a third Republican, about a third Democrat, and then that middle third independents up for grabs, the fact that Trump has such high negatives with independents means that he is the least electable of the three candidates going into the general election against the lovely nominee of Hillary Clinton.
Lovely nominee. And we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Dr. Heldman again. It's Dr. Caroline Heldman at Occidental College. Wonderful person. Great insight in the political world. Dr. Heldman, here's a theory I have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've been corrected many times before. Trump, when he starts let's say he wins the nomination and he starts putting his little laser focus on Hillary, will the Republicans, the ones who said no, I'd never vote for him, or they don't like him, once they see him attacking a common enemy in the Republican Party, of course, a common enemy, somebody they despise, a lot of these people, will they start changing their view?
I think that Republicans, regardless of who the nominee will be, Republicans will rally around that person. Trump may not inspire. He might keep some Republicans home on Election Day, but I actually think that he will bring the party together. And your theory that it would be around a common target. Now, Hillary Clinton is, it's a favorite pastime for Republicans to hate Hillary Clinton. And I would argue for the past 3 decades, it's been in some pretty profoundly gendered ways. So I think that while Trump is the weakest out of the 3, out of Cruz, Rubio, and Trump, he also can give Clinton a run for her money because the big wild card is implicit and explicit sexism in the election. We've never encountered this situation. We know from previous research that every woman who has even attempted to get into this office from those political parties has faced some pretty steep barriers, gendered barriers. And so even though Trump is the least electable, I still think that the race will be a lot closer than people anticipate.
Oh, that's great insight. That's true. It's such an unusual and unbelievable year, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I think that Trump is the backlash candidate against having 8 years of a black president. I think that he has given a lot of Americans permission to be explicitly racist. I think if you look at who his supporters are, it's really only about 13% of the electorate supports him. Obviously, that base will widen if he gets the nod, but 1 in 5 of them don't think that Lincoln should have freed the slaves. 1 in 3 think that Japanese internment was perhaps a good idea. And 1 in 3 want to ban gays and lesbians from entering the U.S. I mean, these are folks with, as we know, higher rates of racial hatred and fear. And they're folks who feel like they're being left behind in the current political structure. And I think that President Obama has been kind of the symbol of that sort of change. The first black president has been very threatening for many Americans. And I think, if we hadn't had 8 years of a black president, we wouldn't have Donald Trump's ascendancy today.
Fascinating thought. It's amazing because it really has opened up, how would I phrase it? I don't want to say a Pandora's box, but definitely a closet. And I don't know if they're skeletons, whatever you may call it, but he's definitely opening up a different look at America. A lot of things are being expressed and exposed that we've been either suppressing or hiding for many, many years, and he's brought it all out.
That's a great point, Dr. Carlos. I think he's revealing what has been there all along. It's telling that, all forms of racism, as we measure it as social scientists, have increased during President Obama's time in office. So he's really hitting on, an implicit nerve, right? This implicit racism that many Americans hold. And Trump is just giving them permission to bring it out into the open.
Yeah, I was reading a fascinating book called "Who Are We" by Samuel Huntington. Mm-hmm. And it's really intriguing. It's a very fitting book for this moment in time. Have you ever taken a look at that book?
Sure. Yeah. His theory. I mean, his theories about American identity or how people form national and individual identity, I think, are pretty timeless. And we're in a crisis right now, right? It's not just the Republican Party that's in a crisis. The Black Lives Matter movement is also, done kind of what Obama's presidency has done. It's revealed implicit and explicit racism that is very persistent in the U.S. So the question now is, how much are we going to feed that in the divisiveness, or are we going to evolve?
Absolutely. It's a great point. I really hope we do. I can't believe our time has run out already. Geez, just never enough time for these conversations, Dr. Heldman. There really isn't. Dr. Heldman, anywhere we can get more information about you? Are you promoting a book right now?
I have a book coming out in the fall on consumer activism in the American context, and it actually looks at how that tool has been used by people who are disadvantaged in the political process to have a voice when they're kept out of politics. So my website is carolineheldman.me.
carolineheldman.me. And you also have some activist groups, or if I remember correctly on your Twitter feed, you were supporting some kind of groups, or if I'm correct, or am I wrong on that?
Yes, I'm working to abolish the statute of limitations for rape and sexual assault in California. So the End
That's what it
Rape
was.
Sexual Assault campaign, as well as Faculty Against Rape.
Perfect. I want to make sure we got that out there. So, Dr. Heldman, we're going to have to bring you back before the fall, well, way before the fall. We'll bring you back a couple times, hopefully with your permission, of course, to talk more about this amazing election cycle. Thank you again, Dr. Heldman.
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful day, Carla.
You too.